students, the second video for January 30th. It's going to involve us taking several of the skills we learned in the previous video that help us clean, manage, and prepare data for analytics, and sort of apply it to a real-world example of something that we might want to organize and ultimately analyze in Excel. Continuing the trend we started last week, these first few weeks especially, but the whole semester is about how to manage and analyze data, but also about where to find it. And, so we'll continually pop in and out of new websites. And the concept I want to introduce today is this notion of open data. I'll refer to this regularly throughout the semester. Most cities at this point, or counties, have one. It's probably very rare that you would find in 2020 a county or regional government that doesn't post one of these. And the best way to access them is quite literally to go to Google or something and search city I'm looking in, open data. This is Philly's, Open Data Philly. And what you'll often find is really a compendium of multiple data sets. In a couple of weeks, when we really start to dive back into the spatial element of this class, the G in GIS, we'll use this to pull together a lot of shape files and such, but it can also be a good resource in finding tabular data, sometimes that you can map, and other times it's just helpful to analyze. And so in that instance, if I were to go to this one category, budget and finance, I find this cool thing here called employee salaries and overtime, which effectively lets me know, for each of the positions in the city of Philadelphia, what they make, how that changed over the year, how much sort of each, city representative makes, how does it vary by department. So it's just kind of a cool way to, effectively see how municipal government balances payroll in Philly. And, theoretically, you could take this data and compare it to sort of other cities as well for an analysis. So if I were to go to here, CSV and download it, remember Kava separated value, I'd get something back that looks like this. And, good, interesting piece of data here. And, it has a field telling me the individual ID. Always good to sort of see what does each record represent, right? That's a common theme we'll return to here. Each record here doesn't represent a person or a job. It represents a year, quarter, person job combo. And that's sort of important, right? Like we could search and probably find, Rosemary Chiliberti, ADM technician in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and sort of each quarter. So important to kind of know with this, right? It's object ID is referring to a unique combination of each of these values right here. So we know the person's name, we know the title, the department, we know the salary. It's a nice data set. All right, we could look at all kinds of things. How do different salary types change over time? How do individual people change over time? How many paid employees are within each department? Do the types of jobs you have vary considerably in salary depending on where you work? All of these questions, we can sort of tease at and play with, and that'll be a part of the next video when we actually take this, into a pivot table. But for now, I want you to ignore that one. And I want you to work on the one that I'm going to provide for you. It's just going to be a purposely bad copy. One in which several things happened that, we need to figure out a way out of. And I'm being very extreme here, but this kind of stuff will happen all the time in varying degrees when you try to access data. Someone will put the dates in one field when you need them in multiple, right? Previously we could look at the calendar year and the quarter individually, but now we can't really. This isn't a date, 20016_1. I can't do date functions with that. I need to figure out how to get that out of there. All these fields, the last name, the first name, the title, and the department have been pushed together. I can't use that to analyze who works for the Common Pleas Court because it's junked together with so many other pieces of information and data that there's no way to dissolve. And finally, I've got a salary here that unfortunately is text. I can tell that because it's justified to the left and I can see the green. And the challenge there is as long as something is text-based, you can't do integer-based arithmetic operations on it. So again, clearly we have the good file, and we'll have wrong one, and we'll happily work with the good file for the next video. But I want to put some of those sort of cleaning techniques into practice as we move through this data set. So we'll start with the first one, right? A common problem you might see where all of your data is sort of pushed together by some common thread. And in this instance, we can see it's a colon or a semicolon that separates each individual element. And so we can fix that by creating a number of different fields. I'd always make sure you have enough fields to store the incoming data. And give it a second, it's loading here because it's a big file. And then select all of the areas or all of the rows that you want to perform text to column. We did this previously. I think we just selected a single value. But in this instance, you'd hold down C, you'd go to text to columns, make sure you're picking a value here. Let's do semicolon. And again, anytime you've nailed it, it'll do just what you want here, right? Separate it perfectly by the semicolon while removing the semicolon part. And this might take a quick second, again, just because this is a bigger file. You can see it's sort of loading itself here. So give it a second to get through. And there you go, right? Nice and easy. Last name, first name, title, and department. So I'm going to save this as something else, just to make sure you guys always have the original copy to work with. And there we go. We've sort of accomplished the first task that we needed to do, which was use text to columns. So it's a super common thing you'll come across when we get into managing data in Excel. We'll start to play with the field calculator version of that, something that's called split. But the concept is when you have a common pattern or recurring character that keeps pieces of text you want apart. And again, it'll become very apparent in the next video. Now that these are apart, and I can select all of the rows if I want, and I can go to Data Filter, something we'll play with in the next video too, and now I can actually see the individual department names. Previously, I couldn't do this. If I tried to do that same thing when it was all together, even if, 27, 40, 50, 80, 90, whatever people worked in the airport commerce department, they'd look like 90 different records because airport commerce would be junked together with all that other information. So super important to be able to segment an individual field, an individual piece of information into its own column so that you can analyze it. So next problem here, we have our salary problem. So this one's easy, right? Let's just use that int function. Anytime you see something that you know is not supposed to be text and you want it to be integer, just quite literally do the int function. There it is. You can copy and paste. I always hold shift to do this. There you go. Now, best practice, I was saying last video, I feel pretty strongly about this. Unless you're constantly going to be shifting your data, you don't want to leave functions live. It can always run into trouble where if you sort of accidentally move or reconfigure a piece of data, that'll affect this. And more importantly, it just takes forever to load because every time you sort or pivot or do anything, it's actively going to be doing that operation to 440,000 rows of data. So effectively, you always want to copy Just like we did last video, paste special values, and there you go. Boom, 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 boom. Last one here, I'll say salary number. Is my year and my quarter. So right now I've gotten to this point where it seems like my year is in the beginning, my quarter's in the end. I want to get it out. And we can approach this in two ways, right? I could use a text to column again and pick the underscore. Or I could play around with some sort of left and right and just practice the broader skills. There's always multiple ways to use functions in both Excel and ArcGIS to get you where you need to go. So do a big one here. I'll say int to make sure that my date stays an integer. Ultimately make an integer of the left foremost characters. And so what that'll do, knowing that the date is always the first four, it'll take 2016, which will originally think it's itself as a text, right? Because I'm taking it from a text document here. We know it's text, it's justified to the left. And then I'm converting that number that comes back to an integer. There you go, you'd have an integer. I do the same thing here. Hey, integer right 1, right? Take whatever sort of the column is. And I know there's only 4 quarters, so it's not going to get above 1 or 4. And then I could copy and paste all the way down. Oop, that's a bit of a failure. I'll try that again. Copy. Paste. What is happening here? I'm clearly doing something wrong. I've just copied too many. All right, copy. Let's do a couple rows at a time. That one seems to be working a little better. And there we go. Taking its time, right? Loading. This might be a quick second. And there we go, right? I've separated out that field, which you can't use, and now I have an individual year field, and now I have an individual quarter field, which is exactly where I want to be for my analysis. So, again, nothing incredibly novel with this video as much as it's a demonstration of how you might take some data that you find online and use these string and text-based manipulation tools, left, text to column, int, text, to actually modify and clean your data. And the reason we're learning this, is now in the next video we're actually going to take this and do what's called a pivot table and actually start to analyze and draw some conclusions from this. But we're more importantly doing it because regardless of whether you're going to be the person who likes to rely a lot on Excel and then takes it into ArcGIS, or you just want to do the basics in Excel, and then the majority in ArcGIS, you're going to need a mechanism to clean and manage and organize data. And I want to make sure that you're comfortable doing it across multiple different platforms.